Thank you. Is social change possible? I mean, is it really possible to change the systems of our society? I've heard a lot of people talking about that lately, given the various stories that are in the news around the violence that African Americans are experiencing at the hands of white police officers. Not all police officers, but some. Have you heard people talking about this, wondering what difference has the 60s even made? Well, I have. I've heard some of you saying it to me after services, and I've been asking myself similar questions. Are things any better off? Well, I want to wrestle with this question this morning from the vantage points of two of the hats that I wear as a minister of social justice. So the first hat, I'm going to speak from the perspective of community organizing. And this is a perspective that Paul Turner, the lead organizer for Amos, our local interfaith community organizing group, he helped articulate this for me at a training he offered this fall here at our church. And he started out by asking, how do people feel about politics today? Throw out some words. How do people feel? Are you like excited and you're psyched for the next presidential election and what's going to happen in Iowa? No. You're going to stop answering your phone. It's divisive, disgusted, discouraged, frustrating. So many people, yes, we feel less trust with our political system, with our legislative system, and people feel like, what's the point? And so we are called apathetic, right? Americans, our great problem is the apathy that we have. And that's what makes social change impossible. We're like, oh, it's just impossible. I'm just one person. How can I go against that big money? What's the point? I've wondered, in fact, if many of you feel that way about social justice. Have you ever felt that way? I have. And so I wonder, as a consequence, how often you might have thought to yourself, man, am I glad I'm not a social justice minister. Like, what's up with that lady? Good luck, Erin. I'm glad that's your job and not mine. Well, I will say that I feel that way sometimes too, discouraged and frustrated, but I assure you that I am not into the ministry of the impossible or being a martyr who spills out all of my lifetime towards causes where nothing happens. I am an activist, but I have strategy on my side, not self-righteousness. I'm a minister of social justice, not a minister of social justice, right? Although there might be moments, but I also wonder too if some of you just might avoid eye contact with me or any of the leaders of our social justice because you're afraid we might try to get you passionate about what we're passionate about. But what matters is what you're passionate about, not what I'm passionate about. But I've got, as a community organizer, from that perspective, I see that I have strategy on my side, not self-righteousness. And I asked you, the reason I started with asking you how we feel about politics is because I knew the word apathy would surface. And did you know that the word apathy comes from the root word for it was apatheia? And apatheia in ancient times meant something more akin to no feeling or equanimity rather than indifference. Do you think Americans feel equanimity about politics? No, right? We're anything but having no feeling or being calm and spacious about politics. No, we're mad, we're frustrated, we're incredulous about how we see things coming into place in our legislative system, or things never coming into place. So we're anything but apathetic. Apathy is not our problem. Our problem is massive resignation. And we tell ourselves that we're powerless to change things, and then we collectively resign, throw up our hands, and we just give away our power. And maybe you've experienced something like this. If you think about power, who has power, you might think, well, I don't have much power, but I'll tell you who does, institutions. Because maybe you've had this experience, a local institution, maybe a school or something. They've decided to do something that negatively impacts your life, and so maybe you write a letter or you go and speak to someone or you speak to several people and try to pull some strings, but then it doesn't change the way you want it to change. And so you think, institutions are the ones who have power, not me. So, and maybe you've learned in your time in life that you know that just because you're right or smart or you have a simple solution, that you're not always going to be heard when you go and speak to someone to try to get the change that you want. We know that it takes more than that. But I fear the conclusion too often we come to is to say, well, power is just something that I don't have. And things don't often change, we know, because they're moral or they're right. They're changed because someone had the power to make them change. And that's a tenet of community organizing, that the things that we change them because we build the power to make it happen. We have power. It's called relational power. You might have experienced something with an institution where it feels more like a unilateral power, where what can you do about this? But we do have power. It's relational power. It's power that in community organizing we demonstrate through our electoral power, through our consumer power, through our money power. And in organizing, we always ask ourselves the question, what kind of power will it take to bring about the change that we're seeking? Too often, I think people, when you get involved in a community and you want to see something change, you might have become a part of a group like one that I experienced in my 20s. It was in the aftermath of September 11th, and people in Burlington, Vermont were getting together to try to encourage our nation to have a peaceful response other than war. And we got together and we planned community events, and we had vigils, and we had speakers, and we gathered in churches, and we gathered in the towns, like on our main street. But you know what I never heard us ask? What kind of power would it take to bring about the results we really want? How are we talking to our local representatives to make sure they're going to bring the message we want to Congress? It felt to me more like we cared about expressing ourselves than really harnessing our power to create change. And while expressing ourselves in a march or a protest or a vigil can be really useful, an organizer says this: every action we do is to get a reaction. So if we're going to hold a vigil or a protest, I will tell you this: I will work really hard. It's hard. I'm so judgmental about this. The only reason in my mind to have a march or a protest like that is so that we can galvanize more like-minded folks to then harness our power to be strategic with it. Because we can have a vigil, but who's the specific person we're asking to make a change? And do they feel accountable to us? Do we have any sway with them? Because if not, sometimes, it's rare, but sometimes it's possible that we can just share what we know, or what is smart, or what is simple, what is wise, and someone will say, oh, I didn't know that, and they'll make a change. But often that's not enough to bring about the changes we want to see in our systems. And that's what I love about community organizing. It took this passion and desire in my life, and it gave it some structure that can actually have real, tangible roots in reality, and not just be like, Erin's expressing herself. I want to express myself to a person who cares and has the ability to bring about change. So when you think about your minister of social justice, I'm not just out there pounding fists. I'm thinking strategically about, how do we engage? How do I help even discern the opportunities to invite our congregation into, so that we're not just throwing our energy into the wind, but we're being smart about the resources that are finite in our lives, like our time and our energy, like Ross spoke to in the beginning. So, as a community organizer, would I say, is social change possible? Yes! Of course I'm going to say that, but we're going to be strategic in the issues that we take on and when we take them on, and thinking about what is it actually going to take to make this happen, and then we set out from there. Well, as a minister of social justice here in this church, you might think similarly that she has to say, yes, social change is possible. But remember, I am a tricky Unitarian Universalist minister, and we aren't always so dogmatic in our answers, clear-cut answers. And I think that's a silly way of saying this, but in many ways, I think how we hold this question can be more important at times than what we answer. And I was reminded of this last fall. I was at a community organizing training in Chicago, and we were, in one of our sessions, we were talking about social progress and what has happened. And some of my African American colleagues, who were a lot younger than me, you might not think that's possible, but I am in my 30s. There were people a decade younger than me there. And they were saying, no, I don't see a lot of racial progress in this country. And And the hope in the room was just plummeting. The whole purpose of this seminar was to show us how the work we do matters. And the group was just like, no, it doesn't. And being a good Unitarian Universalist, idealistic, and hopeful person that I am, I spoke up and shared stories from the civil rights movement from a tour that I took of the South while I was in seminary. And I spoke with great conviction and hope, championing the ability of the civil rights movement to be an agent of progress. And I said things like, at least Black people are no longer getting murdered like they used to in our nation. So it's probably no surprise to you that my comments upset many of the people in the room. I was blinded by my insatiable need for hope. I knew that Michael Brown had been shot. I had mentioned it in the services and the joys and concerns the week before or two before I went to this training. And yet I just, as a white person, it's hard to accept the reality that exists, the bubble that I can live in, because it means my heart's going to be broken, and it has to stay broken for me to really accept the state of race relations in our nation. And I'm so grateful that this colleague spoke up and warned me of this blind spot that I had, this need to claim hope, even against reality. And she was so generous and compassionate in the way that she spoke up, letting me know that while my intent may be good, the impact it was having was really hurtful. And after I waited for an acceptable amount of time in that classroom, being called out in front of 40 people for saying something racially insensitive, I went to the bathroom and cried. I felt horrible. How could I be a minister of social justice and then say something and I wasn't even aware at that moment? What had I just done? But I went back and I asked her if she'd be willing to help me see what it was I wasn't able to see. I'm so grateful she called me out. I'm so grateful she went to lunch with me and generously shared her personal experiences and was willing to be vulnerable with me again after I really hadn't gotten it. And I'm really grateful that I asked, that I was willing to not know and say, I just made a mistake. Help me see what I can't see. And I share this story because as I hear people keep asking, is progress happening? Does social change, has it made any difference? Can it actually happen? I think there are times when I'm actually not the person to field that question. There are times when it's more important than me standing up here saying, yes, social change can happen. It's more important for me to listen. Who am I learning from in my community? Who are the people who are marginalized or oppressed, and what are they saying? And perhaps I should listen to them and not my own deep desire for hope. And sometimes the way we hold the question really is what matters. But the way I can authentically hold this question and answer as a Unitarian Universalist minister about whether or not change is possible is to remind us who we are as a religious people. Are we people who believe in the goodness of human beings? Are we? Are we people who believe that we're born whole and sacred and worthwhile? Amen. Are you sure? Am I in the right church? What time is it? I think it's almost noon. Okay, yes, we are. We believe that this earth and the universe with all of its life is holy, and that we exist in it because of it, and that we do not exist above other life forms, but that we are a part of the unfolding and the amazing ongoing life of the universe, that the planet wasn't put here just for us, but rather we are a part of it and we are stewards in relationship. We're connected to all. The destiny of the one is the destiny of the many. And you may think theologically, oh, Unitarian Universalists, we don't have any shared theology. You can believe whatever you want in this church. But I want to expand your definition of the word theology. Did you know that theology, there are actually about 11 different categories in religion, in many religions? Your understanding of God does not equal what theology means. Your understanding of God is one of the many categories in theology. There's also the understanding of humanity, how you understand the nature of the universe, how you understand the nature of truth, of the afterlife, of the purpose of church, ecclesiology, soteriology, hermeneutology, soteriology, anthropology. There are all of these different fancy words for how we make meaning of the world. The category of God is one that we don't have a dogma. We don't all believe it or think about it in the same way. But what we lift up instead is how we understand humanity and the nature and the worth of people, how we understand the nature of the universe, where we come from, our relationship to it, how we understand truth, who has access to it, its constant unfolding. And so being people with these views and beliefs of our location on this planet and our connection with one another, then our work becomes, our faith put into action, is to engage the world with love. This world that we love, it's to engage it with reverence, with respect, with care. So the question of social justice isn't, I challenge you to put the question down, is change possible? That question does not matter as much as, how am I loving the world? It's not about solving, we're not here to solve life's most persistent, troubling questions. We're here to care about the world. Knowing that each who is born is sacred and whole, we must respond with pain and outreach when we see someone being racially profiled, being disproportionately incarcerated, being needlessly beaten or killed. Knowing in our bones that we're made of the earth, that our breath is shared with all of life, we must make changes when we learn that our human desires and consumerism is altering the life, the climate and the life of the entire planet. So put the question down, does change really happen? Because that's this philosophical thing that in many ways I think doesn't really matter. What matters is that our faith calls us not to solve the problems, but to engage the world we live in and bring our love to it.
I agree. I am part of FEDS, which stands for Feeding Every Deserving Soul or Stomach. This past year, we fed 200 or more people every single month. And I know we're not going to end hunger in Des Moines, but I help feed people because I believe that recognizing the inherent worth and dignity in every person means recognizing that every person deserves to eat.
So I will also say we gave out horns. The hope was that people who had been involved in this, or whatever justice effort you've been involved in, that you get to toot your own horn. That this isn't just we're celebrating that Laura does that, but that many people in our church do this.
I'm John McAllister. I'm a member of Energy and Justice for All, and I joined Energy and Justice for All to take part in the climate movement because I'm scared that climate change is already killing people around the world and promises to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, humanitarian disaster that humanity has ever known. And so it's kind of overwhelming, but to confront that, we helped, this committee helped raise over $5,000 to set up a scholarship to low-income students who can study wind energy at DMAC. And we also put in some new light bulbs here at the church, which is actually going to pay for themselves inside of a year. So we're doing a lot, and I hope you join us. Thanks.
Hello. I'm part of the church's Death with Dignity group, which is part of a larger organization called Compassionate Choices. We want what Oregonians and Washingtonians and Vermonters want, the right to choose how we end our terminal illness. We collect petitions, we speak to service organizations, we talk to church groups, and we talk to state legislators about our desire to further this social movement. We encourage you to learn about our group, and should you want to become a member, please contact me or somebody else from the group. Thank you.
We're never too old to giggle at horns.
Hello, I was part of our LGBTQ rights group here at the church for the past 6 years and our interweave group for the past 15. I became involved in both groups because I wanted to end the inequality, injustice, and violence faced by lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. Though I didn't think it would happen in our lifetime, we worked to obtain marriage equality, and then after the Iowa Supreme Court granted it, we worked to prevent a state constitutional amendment to take it away again. We also saw the enactment of laws to end discrimination against LGBTQ people in employment and public services in Iowa, to change laws that treated HIV-positive people unjustly in Iowa, and to end discrimination against LGBTQ servicemen and women in the military nationally. And after 3 state Supreme Court justices were ousted in retaliation for the marriage equality ruling, we have so far been able to prevent further attempts to insert politics into our judicial retention process. After over 2 decades of work on LGBTQ rights, this social justice group is ending for now, as the congregation is called to other social justice work. Though work still remains to be done, that I am confident this congregation will again be a part of someday, we have clearly come a long way, and we should be proud of this church's part in that.
I got involved with Amos Criminal Justice because I learned that there had been a huge increase in detention holds for African American juveniles for simple misdemeanors offenses here in Polk County. 767% increase. In the same time period, whites' detention rate increased only 113%. In our team that works on this issue, we helped plan a conference to change how we hold youth accountable when they have problems. The Developing Brain Developing Accountability Conference in September, this past September, had over 700 people attending. We also have a task force that meets regularly with the chief of police and his officers. I do this because it's painful for me to think of racial disparity among children in our American justice system.
I got involved in the Amos Middle School Mediation Project because I care about young people and a future for them outside of the criminal justice system, and I wanted to help them be able to create a successful path for themselves. Being a mediator this last year, I've watched over 24 young people learn a more respectful way to deal with conflict. This matters to me because these youth, they are the hope for our future in this wider community.
I'm short. Okay. I got involved with Amos to get 300,000 uninsured Iowans enrolled in health insurance made available through the Affordable Care Act. To that end, our Amos team educated 1,200 uninsured Iowans and their influencers about the value of being covered and how to get covered. We assisted in the enrollment of 300 formerly uninsured individuals and families living in the center city of Des Moines. I do this work to put an end to the unnecessary suffering of pain and poor health and their economic and spirit-killing consequences in the lives of uninsured Iowans.
You know, I've always wanted to toot my own horn.
Yeah.
I got involved with Amos because of my pain. My pain about my children, about all children, all adults who live the reality of mental illness and addiction. I got involved with Amos because I care about the grossly inadequate access to quality services for persons living with mental illness and substance abuse and their families. In the 5 years that the mental health group has been working together, we have lobbied successfully for mental health redesign in Iowa, and it's not perfect yet, but we're still working. We have lobbied hard and long. We have hosted a community mental health conversation among community stakeholders every 3 months for 5 years, promoting integration of services, whole person care, and mental health literacy. We have also launched a community-wide anti-stigma campaign. I do this because I have 2 children with chronic mental illness, 2 beautiful children, and because of the pain and stigma that they have endured. And even though I can't solve all these problems, I can do something. I can work with other people. And thinking back to the music earlier, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
Who knew these horns would make you all smile so much? It's really fun to see you.
Well, I wanted to help heal this country's systemic racism, but I didn't know how to even begin. In 2013, I went to a workshop here at this church called The Other Side of the Coin, Anti-White Racism. It absolutely opened my eyes to a concept of whiteness. And even more, as that's grown through me, to see how that concept is part of what keeps racism in place today. And so we're going to have more of those workshops, and we can uncover the roots of this concept, in part in the history of our country. And just because it hasn't yet been part of our national conversation, it doesn't mean that we can't have it now.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill. So just thinking about, and these aren't the only people in their groups, you all, there are many relationships in this church and people who are involved in social justice through our church and people who are contributing and serving our community and what you care about in ways that are beyond our church. So is social change possible? Yes. Do you feel it? Yes. We're not here to solve everything, but there is power in acting. There is power in our love. And to have integrity as a people of faith, then our only task is called to engage our love in the world we so dearly love. So if you're looking for a way, as you think about that heart that you have and the love that you hold and what you love and what you care about and how are you loving in your life, and if some kind of social justice, not social justice, but faith and action social justice is what's calling you to engage in your life, I encourage you to speak with one of these lovely people. In the gathering area after the service, there will be tables for a social justice fair where you can learn more about the groups and what they're up to. Also, if you have a passion for a project that's not happening and you want to see if other people in the church are interested, come talk to me. Let me know. On April 12th, we also have a really exciting event happening in this church that's going to give us the opportunity as a people of faith to put that faith and love into action together. Instead of holding services here that day, we're going to invite the entire congregation to get in small groups and go do service projects in our community. On that day, the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines is going to be bringing our love out into Des Moines. So if you have an organization that you're involved with that you would like to see some people go and support, come talk to me. If you'd like to host a group of people volunteering at a place in the community, come talk to me. If you love organizing events like this and you want to think through how we're going to structure this, come talk to me. This is a wonderful opportunity, a bold way for us to say we don't just talk about our beliefs and sing about them, but we actually come together as a community and experience the power of so many people loving around our values together. So throw the question away. I encourage you to just throw that question away, is social change possible? And instead to pick up the question, what do you love and how are you loving in the world? Because that's really what we're called to do. Amen.